Bray, Keon, and Yanze back when they're guys that could have maybe tested NFL?
Well, those are the decisions, right, that are made in January that affect us from September to the next January, hopefully, and those are some of the biggest wins in recruiting. They're also, we try to be very open with our players about what we think the best decision is for them, and we're really fortunate. We have such great connections with all NFL organizations that we get great feedback. We're able to give them accurate information, and then they make the best decision possible. But, if you look over the past here, when you've had a grouping of guys that have kind of made that decision to come back as a group together, there's typically been success to follow. And so, it certainly puts us in a great position.
What's your off-season self-scout sort of show you about the defense?
Well, I think, for us, one of the things that we just have to continue to do is find ways to create negative plays. We just haven't. We still haven't been able to generate the pass rush for the first year and a half until towards the back end of the season. And then Yanze was able to kind of give us something coming off the edge, and just that affecting the quarterback. When we get in 2-minute situations, having to be able to have something where we can go 4-man rush, where we're not having to play man coverage and pressure out of it. Those are things that we've got to continue to work on. But to me, I think we've done some good things here, and I know our numbers and all that stuff have been pretty solid for the last 2 years. We just haven't been a dominant defense, consistently throughout the season. We've shown flashes of it, but I'd like to be more dominant up front. I think we've addressed some of those needs with the guys that we've got in the transfer portal. Really excited with some of the new defensive linemen, excited about the growth that I see from some of the guys that have been here in our program. And so we're finding creative ways to get them in the backfield a little bit more.
Do you sense that the bandit and the wolf positions are kind of more interchangeable than they have been in the past?
Yeah, they definitely, we started to kind of evolve to that, this past season. I mean, we moved Yanze to Wolf, Bandit. We did different things with those guys and tried to create a lot of packages. I think we do have some pretty good depth right now at those positions, and so finding creative ways to kind of get those guys matched up based off the situation or the personnel that we want on the field. Those will be things that we're going to make sure that we're exploring every avenue there.
Who stood out?
I'm sorry.
Who has stood out?
Well, I think Yanze's continued to take that next step forward. He's carrying himself like a guy that has accomplished a lot of things this past season should, and the opportunity that he's created for himself going into this season, right? He can create a lot of value in his draft stock. And so those are things that I think he stood out. Obviously, we're doing a lot with DT. Devin Tompkins is moving around for us. He can play outside. He can play inside. And he's kind of a force to be reckoned with. But I'm excited about a number of those guys. I mean, Justin Hill's taken a step forward. Cavante Henry is really starting to come on. Typically, when you come from a junior college, that's always kind of been the case. That first year, it's kind of 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But I think he's in position now to push himself, and then really fortunate to be able to get Desmond Umezulo back, to get him out of the transfer portal. That was a big win for us.
What did you guys like about Tompkins when he got in the portal, and what have you sort of seen from him since then?
Well, you try to find versatility, right? Guys that can do multiple things, multiple positions, and that to me is something that he brings to the table. Just because of his athleticism and because of his size and strength, he can do things inside and outside at a pretty high level. Once we got to know him, and you started doing your research from his time at USC. This guy's a captain. He's a leader. He carries himself with a professional demeanor day in and day out, and he has absolutely, shown that in the first 2 months of being here. Just the level of maturity that he brings, the work ethic. He wants to be coached. He wants to be pushed, and he has a really, really high ceiling.
What do you like about Carmelo O'Neal coming out of the portal?
Yeah, so it's funny. You pick up on things, right? We were watching Auburn, and they had played Mercer the week before, and I was like, damn, who is this long, DB that they got at Mercer, whatever. And then Mo, we in our recruiting staff, we kind of found him through our transfer portal evaluations, and kid's great. He's hungry. He wants to take a step forward. He knows that there's some things from a fundamental standpoint that he could grow in, and he's like a sponge right now. I mean, just you teach him something, he picks up on it really fast, and you don't see a guy that, I mean, we're already long in the secondary, and then all of a sudden he's a little taller than Dijon Lee, which is hard to believe, and still have corner feet. And so there's a lot of things we could do with him, but right now he's doing a really nice job on the outside. I'm excited about him.
What have you seen from Shira and Jordan kind of getting their feet wet?
Yeah. Well, the nice thing is for us, right, we're going to make an investment in the high school, market, and we can get the best players in the country coming out of high school. The key is, right, you got to make sure you get a return on your investment, and the days of waiting around 2.5 years for those players to develop and then get on the field, that's really not feasible, right? That's not a good business structure. So for us, right, we've got to make sure we identify guys that are not only the most talented, but also have a maturity to be able to come in and do the work. Xavier Brown, Dijon Lee, Ivan Taylor, Mincy, those guys have all come in and they've been able to contribute for us in year one. And I think both those guys are very much on pace to do that.
The Husky position, obviously you've got Red coming back, but who else is sort of working in there? What do you think about that?
Well, it's such a versatile position. We talked about that before. You got to play man, you got to play, blitz off the edge, play the run fit, zone drop, all those things. Red he is taking his game to another level right now. I mean, he's just playing. It's a very instinctive position, right? And Red has great instincts, and he has the ability to go make some of those plays. In a number of ways, but Chuck McDonald is doing a really nice job at that position, and obviously can play corner, and also just has the size and frame and athleticism to play at the nickel. And then Drake Kirkpatrick is going back and forth between Rover and the Husky position. So we're in a really good place right now. It's our secondary is, one, you have these guys that are coming back, but it's also highly competitive right now. So excited to see what that competition brings out of that group.
What do you think about the inside backers? A lot of new faces there. What do you see?
Yeah, well, you identify guys, in the last 2 years, and we knew we were going to have this kind of void of experience that we thought was going to show up last year, and then the ruling came out where JJ could come back. And then Deontay Lawson made the choice to come back. Then we get Nakai Hill-Green out of the transfer portal. And now you got experience again. And so now all of a sudden that void is kind of hit this year. Caleb Woodson's been a really great presence in that room, just from an experience, maturity standpoint. But we knew we were building to this. And so, we tried to bring a great young class the last couple of years. And now it's time for those guys to step up and make plays, right? So they're in a good spot right now. I'm excited for them. They're deep. But I want to see kind of that grouping of guys separate themselves into the top, 4 or 5 guys that we can really enter into the season with.
Whether it comes between, say, Bandit, Wolf, or Husky corner, as a coach, what's the difference between like making sure a player is versatile versus making sure that they know their assignment, that they know like one position forward?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. The consistency of doing your job. Most of the guys that we do that with, that we play multiple positions, have been in this scheme for a couple of years, right? So, typically when a guy comes in as a freshman, we set him into kind of one thing, and then we build and grow from that, from there. And so, that's something that Drake Kirkpatrick, Red Morgan, Zabian can do those things. Bray Hubbard. I mean, that's, they've just been repping the same plays for 2.5 years now, right? And so it gives us a chance to be able to do those things more. But to your point, right, if a guy can't handle that, right, then we got to make sure that we settle him into one position. And there's a value in that the NFL puts on players, that we put on players. What type of position versatility do you have?
Caleb Woodson, just what has he brought, not only from an on-the-field standpoint, but from a leadership standpoint?
Well, he's a professional. I mean, he's very much businesslike about his business. He uses the resources of this program, which are obviously vast here. So he's up here a lot. He's around the program. You can see he's already engaging some of the younger players. He's not just here for himself. He wants to be a good teammate. He wants to be a leader. He's hungry. He asks a lot of questions. But probably the biggest thing that stands out over the first 4 days is just how hard he plays. I mean, we are stressing the effort and finish that we play with. I think, do we play hard as a defense? Yes. But there's a level of when you turn on the tape, and historically in our defensive system, this has been a staple of who we are. When you turn on the tape, watch the all-22 copy, when you turn on a nationally televised game, the effort and finish that you see is something that should stand out about our defense. And so it has been solid, but it hasn't been elite. And so we want to make sure we're doing that. Caleb is really setting the tone for those things right now.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it.
All right.